Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be giving a small update on some of our projects and hopefully making a part, or if that part turns out alright, we'll be making multiple parts. Now that does sound a bit mysterious at first, but all will be clear in just a second. Sorry for any background noise, our heater is on because it is very cold out here. And you may have noticed how empty it is down this end of the workshop, but if Dad turns around and shows the other end, you may notice that it's not so much empty on the other end of the workshop. But I will point out some key things for our updates that I promised at the start of this video. Firstly, as you can see, the Kohler engine for our 1960 Rideamatic that we're mechanically restoring is back. So very soon that can be completed. It just needs a couple more bits put on, carburetor, stuff like that. Make sure it runs, and then it will be dumped into the tractor, and then this will be very close to completion, finally. But before we put the engine in, we have taken off the fuel tank support stand thing, and you may remember from a video recently, or relatively recently, that we said we wanted to turn our 1960 parts tractor into an actual tractor, and the main part that this was missing, other than an engine obviously, was this fuel tank stand. So today this is the first part that we're going to be trying to replicate. Obviously that's quite complex, which is why I said that we might not get onto other parts, but if we do get onto other parts, then they will be steering drag links. This is the one from this 1960 parts tractor. We have taken the tie rod ends off, but it's largely irrelevant for now. You may remember we fitted this to our orange 1962 Rideamatic because it didn't have one on it when we got it. And we actually discovered recently that a 1960 Rideamatic drag link is different to a 1961 and 62. I believe in the angle of the bend there on the drag link. So technically this wasn't actually right on that 1962, and we want this 1962 project finished soon as well. So this is also kind of relatively urgent, so hopefully we can get onto these today. In theory, this one could just go back on this tractor, or we could make a new one for this, but the main reason for making drag links would be for this Rideamatic and another Rideamatic that you haven't seen yet that also needs one, which is a 1961 model. So this is how this fuel tank support bracket mounts onto the tractor, just so you can see. And the main complications with making one of these is that obviously there's lots of different holes and slots. There's multiple brackets on the bottom here which need to be bent at quite large angles, drilled and welded in exactly the right place, and quite a large angle on the main kind of plate part on the top there. So if I set this down here, we've actually done a bit of preparation for this before the video today. Wasn't actually planned, all of it, but it turned out quite well. So here is what we've got so far. We've got a piece of metal of around the right thickness, and we weren't fully sure if we were going to be able to do this bend on our press. It would have been very difficult. So we'd researched some metal bending places kind of local to us, and we weren't fully sure if they'd be able to do it either. So when I was at college one day, Dad took this down there, and instead of giving us an appointment or something to get this done, they did it then and there, which was very good of them. So that was the first part of the challenge. Then Dad has drilled the two holes where this goes onto the dash panel, and also done all of the shaping around here with these kind of 45-degree cuts and everything, and cleaned that all up nicely. Obviously the remaining bits are the kind of battleship scheme we've got with the holes and slots on the top, then those brackets for the bottom. Speaking of the holes, they are 9/32, if that's what you call them, and we got that because we've got a drill bit here of that size. That is pretty much what they are there. So we didn't have a mill cutter of that size, but we ordered one, and we now have that in one of our auto lock chucks here. So that is all ready to go. This just needs to be set up in the mill, which is going to be quite a challenge in itself. We've actually moved the turret forward to give us as much travel as possible on the table, so hopefully once we set the DRO to 0, we can play battleships, if people know what I'm talking about when I say that, and kind of move it to the coordinates of each hole and slot and do this as accurately as possible, seeing as there's a number of things that mount to this, and if we get some of them out of line then it's going to be awkward for everything else pretty much, seeing as you've got the belt guard that goes alongside the Versamatic, you've got the Versamatic control lever itself, fuel tank straps, and probably something else that I'm forgetting, but yeah, it's quite important. Then after we've done all of that milling work, we still have those brackets to do on the bottom, so plenty to do, and that's why I kind of phrased it as we may or may not get onto the drag links today, but we'll see. Now we have the long job of setting this up in the mill, getting it mounted, and then trying to line one of the corners up as 0 on the mill, unless we can find an easier way. So this is going to take a little while, and we will use the magic of the camera to cut now, and we'll be back in just a second. Literally hours later now, and we are just about set up in the mill here. We've got a number of 2-inch, 1-inch and 1/2 inch blocks stacked accordingly underneath our workpiece here, and then this kind of brace bar across the top. This isn't ideal because when we tightened up the bar it did kind of bow a bit, but it's the best we're going to get without a bracing kit, and we don't have one of those for this mill unfortunately. We are still looking for one. Hopefully at some point we'll get one because it'll make this kind of thing 10 times easier, but we have to work with what we've got for now. And originally we were talking about making this corner of our workpiece the 0 for our DRO. However, we've had to make it this corner, and that is because we're working very close to the limitations of our y-axis, which is the backwards and forwards on our Cincinnati mill, and if we used this corner we wouldn't actually get far enough out to do the slots along this edge. So we're having to go from this side and work that way, but that is all set up correctly now, and the easy way to overcome that in theory would be to turn it 90 degrees. However, we can't do that because if you look at the kind of slot and hole pattern, there's no point on here where you can easily put a brace across there to hold it without blocking some of your holes. At that point you'd then have to take the brace off and move it, and then you have to reset your DRO origin, and that's just unhelpful, and it kind of means that we would have to spend another couple of hours setting it up again, which we didn't fancy. So that's all set up now, and we do actually have our DRO set to the center of the first hole, which we found by using one of these center punches of the correct size, 9/32, if that's what you call them, rather than 9/32. And we put this up through here, and then we used a ruler which is inch specific to get the kind of coordinates of it compared to that corner, or the two edges, seeing as we zeroed both of the edges on there, to the center point on the center punch. And we did that over something like measuring to the edge of the hole and then adding half of the diameter, because a few of these holes might be slightly ovaled, so that would make that inaccurate, and hopefully this would kind of limit the effect of an ovaled hole a bit. So that's kind of how we found those first few positions. I'm going to put that somewhere else so it doesn't drop, but as I said, we've moved it to the first position, which is 9 inches from this side. By using this corner, we have kind of mixed up, I don't know how you call it other than like the polarity of our scales. So going in towards the mill, we're having to work in minuses, but it's still 9 inches from this edge and half an inch this way from that edge. So that is the location of the first hole. And we also checked that by using our ruler to measure against the other edge to make sure that was in the right place, and it is. So we're all happy with that, and we are pretty much ready to do this first hole. We will go through all of the hole positions and then kind of reset when it comes to the milling. We've locked our X and Y axes. I'll now put some lubricant on the drill bit, and that's gone onto the workpiece already. So we'll start it up and let's go. That's us through the first one. Now to measure up the next one on our existing tank support bracket and move us along. And that hole looks nice too, so that's good. So we've measured up our coordinates for the next hole, and this hole is in line with our first one. When it comes to the y-axis, so we only need to change our x-axis, which is helpful. So I'll just take this lock off, and instead of being half an inch in from the side, this time it is 4 1/4. So we will move along to there. Try and get 4.25 exactly. It's quite difficult when you're working to 4 decimal places. That's exact, but I reckon when I put the lock on it will change slightly, so it's not too bad. So that's exactly where we need to drill the next hole. So that's all ready to go there. And when it comes to the remaining holes, there are a couple more that are kind of in line. You can see this is our second hole. The third one is in the same X position, only the Y will need to be changed. And then these 2 holes, although they don't line up with any of the first 3, kind of line up with each other. So that's nice and easy. So it's now time to do the drilling of this hole. now done all of our holes back there, and we're pretty pleased with how that's turned out, and it looks all right. Obviously we won't know until we're kind of mounting parts to it, but for now that looks pretty accurate. And we're now onto our slots. We've already switched over to our mill cutter there, and we're going to start off with this slot because it is actually in line with this hole here, which makes sense seeing as these are the mounting points for the fuel tank braces that go over the fuel tank, so it makes sense for them to be in line. So we're going to start with this one. We're going to go from this side to that side. We've already lined it up with this side, and we know how much we have to go over by, so we are pretty much ready to do our first slot and see if that goes as well as the holes did. We've now done those first two slots, and we're not especially happy with the finish on them. It does appear like the initial hole is bigger than the slot, which is not what you want. And that's probably because an end mill isn't the best when it comes to drilling, and it wasn't an especially expensive one. And a drill is always going to be better at drilling than an end mill, and an end mill is always going to be better at milling than a drill. So what we think for our final three slots, there's kind of one there and then two small ones there and there. And we're going to do the one that's here next, and we're going to do the initial hole with the drill, which we've already switched over in the mill already, and then we will use the end mill to go along. The only issue with that would be if the drill and end mill are different sizes. Hopefully they won't be, but we can make sure that they go in at exactly the same point using the DRO, so hopefully that will limit any kind of difference between the two. So we're now going to measure up the starting point of this next slot, and we can be drilling the first part of it. We've drilled our three starting holes now, and we've switched the mill cutter back in, and it's now time to do the first slot of these three with the new method. And this is the longest one, so we'll see if it has an effect or not. But here we go. That is now all of the holes and slots cut in this plate now, and I think they look quite good. There's obviously some deburring and a bit of other cleaning up measures to happen to make them look as good as possible, but for now I think that's a decent job done. Now when it comes to that cleaning up, for you on camera that will be about 20 seconds time. However, for us in real time that will be tomorrow, because we're being hassled for dinner at the moment, and if we don't go in now then dinner will be in the cat. So there'll be a smooth transition now into tomorrow. It is the next day now, and we've had a bit of a clear up on the mill, put that back to its usual kind of storage state, and we've had a bit of a move around to get the press out as well. We've done a couple of things already today. We did some deburring of our holes and slots to kind of clean them up a bit, and I would say that hasn't turned out too badly. We did do a bit of investigation when we were taking the mill cutter out of the collet. That wasn't actually loose, which would have been an explanation for it wandering about a bit. So not a clue what caused that, but now that it's cleaned up a bit, it's not too bad. And I mean, that's going to be covered anyway, so that's not a huge problem. Now onto the brackets that will go on the bottom of the plate. We found a couple of bits of metal. Firstly, this one, which we've already cut and drilled a hole in to match the hole on the end there, and to give us a nice straight edge for the end. Obviously this is going to need to be bent twice for that bend and that bend, and then cut to length there, which we think should be before this hole, so we don't have to worry about that. And we've cleaned up at the necessary end because it was like that all the way along, which made it look a bit nicer. So this will be bent in just a second using our press. The other thing that we've done is we've made up the other bracket as well out of a different bit of metal, which is quite rusty, so that'll need either grit blasting or sanding or something before we weld it on. And we've decided to go down the same route of making a larger hole in here and then pressing in a 5/8 flange bushing. That means that if that wears in future, we can just replace the bushing rather than just having an ovaled hole, which is what our original one here did have until we drilled that out and fitted a bushing as part of our 1960 Rideamatic mechanical restoration. Now obviously this second bracket, all it needs now is that bushing pressed in and then to be welded on, whereas this one needs to be bent, cut to length and then welded on. And we're going to do the bending of this bracket now. We've got our piece of bar set up in the press using one of our dodgy press tools, and we've tried to line it up as best as possible. Now, having measured the other bar that we've got this kind of gauge set up to the correct angle, which is 32 degrees off being straight. So that's kind of what we're going off of for doing this, but it's about as much preparation as we can do for this other than just doing it and seeing how it goes. So that is what we shall do now. Seems to be bending all right. A long time later now, and we have actually put both of the bends into this piece of steel, and they are pretty much correct. However, we might not be able to use this because, as you can see, when we were doing this bend, it cracked quite badly. And when you look at the side, the crack has gone pretty much all the way through. So in theory, we could grind this a bit and weld it, but with it being this brittle, I'm not sure we want to use this on a part that's going to have vibrations and stuff going through it. So we are probably going to scrap this, unfortunately, and start again when it comes to this bracket. And we're not even sure if we've got any more of this thickness material. We're not too keen on using the same stuff again, because obviously this is pretty brittle. Probably high carbon steel or something like that. But we're going to have to probably buy some new material for this, so that'll have to be another day for making up another one of those. Now, we don't want to end on that low, so we've grit blasted our other bracket, and we're now going to push the bushing in for that, and that'll probably be the last thing that we can get to today, because that did take us quite a while to get those angles right, just for that to crack. But that's unfortunate. So let's head over to the press. We can show you our setup. So we have a socket there just to kind of add some depth and support for that. bushing goes in this side, and we don't actually have a pressing tool for this size, so we're just going to use a bolt, and that should work well for that. Slide this under here, and we can begin pressing that in. It's good that it's kind of going relatively easily. Sorry. Right, that should be good. Turn this out a bit. And there we are, that is our bushing in. It is day 3 now, and assuming you're still watching this, the saga continues. However, we have made some progress. Now, we didn't have any inch-wide bar, which is what this is. So, in the end, we found some 2-inch bar of the correct thickness and cut it down the middle, which was not a quick job at all, but we did it. And we then bent it, drilled it, and cut its length. And if I put this next to the other one, they are pretty much the same, and we are happy with that. And no sign of cracking on this one, so that's much better than the previous one that we made, which is now destined for the scrap. So we now have both of our brackets to go onto the plate. This needs to get welded on about there. This needs to get welded on about here. So before we can do that, we're going to have a bit of a tidy up, then get the welder out and work out how we're going to hold these brackets in the right position to weld them. Now, we've kind of fast-tracked a lot of steps here because it was taking us quite a while to get these brackets lined up. However, they are now welded on, as you can see, and we're happy with the positioning of both of them. And Dad did some quite nice welding on there, seeing as he didn't have any practice in the lead up today. And we got rid of all the splatter and that kind of thing. But this part is now effectively finished. So we have lined this up on the tractor. There is kind of a knack to putting this on. You have to line up the bottom bracket and then line up the holes at the top with the bolts. I won't do that now, but we've tested it. It fits. You may have noticed the ratchet strap though here, which is kind of pulling the dash tower back a bit, because compared to our other 1960 Rideamatic, this one, the dash tower seems to be bent forward a bit, which meant that this wouldn't fit when we had all the correct dimensions. So that is something that we'll need to do permanently when we come to this project, is bend the dash tower backwards a bit. But at least we found that out before we painted the tractor, because that would have scraped up quite a lot of paint. So that's another job on the job list, but quite a big one ticked off. We won't be doing the drag links today because I think we've had enough headaches over the last few days with this part. So we'll leave that for another time. And things that we thought would be easy on here turned out to be difficult, and the bits we thought would be difficult turned out to be relatively easy. But now, from a few bits of metal and a part to get dimensions off of, we now have effectively an unobtainable part that was missing from this tractor. So I'd say that is a job well done. But that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.